My name is Derrick. I'm from Louisiana. I've lived in Texas for about 10 years. I'm a double master's degree student, studying information systems and getting an MBA as well. And I'm an artist. In my spare time, I also do a lot of activism. This is kind of one of the areas that I'm most concerned with as well. So, good to meet all of you.
Tanja, you can go next.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tanja Burkhard. Since we're saying ages, I'm 31 years old. My pronouns are she and her. I'm from Germany, and I'm a postdoctoral associate at the University of Pittsburgh. And my work focuses on the Black diaspora, specifically Black migrant and immigrant women, and feminist alliance building. So that's my professional and also my personal
Wow.
Monica, you can introduce yourself next.
Yeah, hey, my name is Monica. I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I am 30, and I identify as Afro-Native, and that's the order of my ethnicity as well. In addition, well, I don't know what I do. I'm a musician. I got involved in activism actually beginning with Native mascots and then together with Black Lives Matter as well in my city. So the Red and Black Unite is really particular to my identity, but also the work that I do in the community. So thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Walelu, you can go next.
Okay. So I'm Walelu Goodman. I am Indigenous and will be beginning my grad school program at Pacifica University either this semester or we'll be putting it off for a year. I haven't really made that decision yet. My field of study will be a depth psychology degree in liberation psychology, eco-psychology, community psychology, and indigenous studies. I am an indigenous activist and am attempting to get involved in all areas of activism where indigenous communities are concerned, and am very interested in really connecting communities between minority groups, especially Black and indigenous communities, because I feel that the louder we talk together, the more likely we are to be heard as a unit rather than individually.
Very nice. Anne, I think is a...
Okay, I'm Anne Remy. I am Lenape, and I'm also Italian. I'm out on the East Coast and in Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, and I'm like one of the original 10 members of the Not Your Mascot group, and I also and with probably maybe 15 other mascot groups, and we've been to probably 5 or 6 schools just in my area in the past year or two. We have I went in the Chamonix with the Redskins mascot, but I've been active in the Native community, especially with the Native veterans, for over 30 years.
Beautiful.
And I'm 48.
That's pretty impressive. Wow. Jeez. Well, thank you all for being here, and hopefully this will be the first of many of these, because solidarity building between our two people is vital for our own liberation. And I'll pose the first topic as I say just that, and I'll go with the first person that's on my screen. Monica, how do you, as a Afro Indigenous person, survive emotionally in this colonized society?
Sure. I don't know that I'm doing it well, but I'm doing my best. It's hard. I believe I would say that plugging into the organizations I'm in allow me to stay connected and affirmed by both of my communities, and that has probably been the most helpful and healthy thing for me. Not that in those organizations I don't we don't run into organizing problems or, personality issues and stuff, because we do, but I feel like that community is always going to be there, even when we run into those structural problems. So that helps me to really feel more affirmed. And as well, I've been able to meet more people by the movements that I'm aligned with. So, for example, Anne I met on Facebook through a lot of the Not Your Mascot and Eradicating Offensive Native Mascotry type groups, which is where I've met a lot of Native mascots. Sorry, not Native mascots. I haven't met any of those. But the activists as well. So I'm really grateful for that. So I guess I would just say finding ways to plug in with folks that are going to be speaking the languages that I'm trying to nail down as far as activism and anti-racism. That's what's kept me feeling okay during this time.
Very good. So Derrick, same question as a Black person, obviously.
Mostly I'm just keeping my head down, honestly, not because out of fear or anything. I am in school, and so a lot of times I can't do a lot of the marches and things like that. I might have an exam or something like that. I do a lot of writing to kind of relieve my artistic angst. As far as kind of staying emotionally stable, because Native people are kind of the only people that I feel can understand certain aspects of the Black experience, just because we were both kind of racialized expressly for this kind of colonial project. I kind of keep myself emotionally grounded by kind of just interacting with people online. I first kind of got into this my senior year of college, and then after then, I kind of wandered around for about a year and a half trying to find out how I could do it after school. And then I wasn't on Twitter then, and then I kind of joined Twitter and kind of realized that this was kind of the best platform, at least to get to know people, just because you follow people that you don't necessarily know. Kind of get to know them over time. So following Native people, following other Black people, following both Native and Black people, and kind of just listening to their stories and kind of their struggles, and kind of seeing how they are similar to mine and how they are different, has kept me grounded. It kind of keeps me from feeling like we are experiencing this in total isolation, which it can sometimes feel like.
Feel that. Tanja, same question.
I was telling you earlier that I thought it was a tricky question for me. I often don't feel really grounded, to be honest, especially in these past 9 months or so. But I think some of the things that I do is unplug and try to strike the balance between taking in information and being really, really invested in certain issues, and also recharging so that I can fully take in certain things. For a while it felt like there was another assault, another killing, another murder in so many different communities that I care about every other day, and it really made it hard to stay grounded for me, or to feel that there's going to be any type of change eventually. But I also recognize that this is not new, and that our ancestors must have gone through the same struggle over and over. Yeah, so I don't have a good answer for that per se, and I was hoping you would skip me on this question, but yeah, I'm appreciative of you all talking about online communities, because I feel like I've been terrible at Twitter. I haven't been great at other things. My academic community is not necessarily always where I am on certain things, but I think this is a great beginning for me, so I really appreciate the space. That's my preliminary answer.
Well, glad we could provide that. Anne, same question?
Well, actually, some days I'm good, and some days I'm not so good. I just, some days it's overwhelming, and there's just some days where I just kind of pull back a little bit, or talk one-on-one with somebody that I always find that helps too. But I went to a predominantly white school. So I've always been around, racism, and sometimes I feel like I'm immune to it because it's just always been there, But with Trump, it really brought it out more. And I know when he was elected, I kind of went into a little mourning, because it just seemed like it was gonna. I felt like everything we did with the mascots was just gonna be undone, but I see that it's actually making people more aware. I don't know. I just find people to talk to when I need a little more emotional help. You have to find some go-to people. So that's what I do.
I would agree with that. I think that's why this type of space is so important. We need to support each other and lean on each other. Okay, certainly not least, but last, Walelu?
I actually really identify with what everybody said. There's no right or wrong way to navigate what's been going on, especially on the emotional side, and finding spaces where you can say the things that you want to be able to say without having to deal with trolls or deal with people who want to immediately jump to negative things about how you're feeling about them, especially coming from a place of being Indigenous or being Black, and not feeling like you have to guard what you say, or that you're going to be immediately jumped on for what you say and what you feel. That's incredibly important, and is unfortunately incredibly rare. I think that's probably the hardest part. Navigating those feelings, I think, in any situation is going to be hard, but in America as it is currently, that is just kind of icing on the cake. We are not living in we were never living in a safe space, but the racism is so incredibly blatant now that there's no escaping it. There's absolutely no escaping it. You can dig a hole and try to hide from it, but there's really no escaping it. So being able to build community now more than ever is so important. And this is why doing the work of uniting communities like Black and Indigenous, and being able to see that we have a lot more in common than we should, due to mass genocide and for all of the wrong reasons, unfortunately. We can come together and kind of prop each other up in times like this. So that's really the best way to navigate that, and dark chocolate and a lot of wine. I really don't have a better answer than just, you know, decide to keep waking up and decide to keep breathing and be glad that most of the time that's involuntary, and just, you know, keep moving forward and find amazing people to share experience with and, you know, live life.
Dark chocolate and wine. I have to try more of that.
Right?
I love the dark chocolate, but I usually go with liquor. Wine's probably more subtle, but
do what you got to do. I mean,
really,
whatever
like,
outlet works.
whatever works. I guess my answer to that question is you guys, because so often, like a few of you said, we don't really get to have these types of spaces, and we need as many of these as possible, because when you're out and about in America, you're either a ghost on stolen land if you're indigenous, or you're like an escaped refugee on stolen land.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very confusing. But knowing that there are other people going through it and trying to fight it and finally beat it and liberate ourselves gives me hope. As well as seeing puzzle pieces put together and seeing more puzzle pieces come out of that, creating an equation and seeing that likeness of it actually work. And I always bring up Fred Hampton. He's 100 times smarter than I'll ever be. He only lived to be 21. Obviously, that was delivered by the government, but he had it right. We all have to be together, people of color, because we've been trying to do this alone for so long, and we just don't have the manpower to do it. And from an emotional standpoint, being in these types of spaces is very soothing, because I get to be myself. I don't have to hide as I call it, growing up in white communities that I did, but still going to Compton cookouts with my family with modified Ebonics, basically. So if I run into white folks I don't know, like I'll have to taper that down. Or being too bold, or being the angry black man, just like, but wait, we're kind of under a rock here. That's the truth. So it's soothing. It's a soothing feeling to be in these types of spaces. And the next thing that we're going to talk about, I want the women to kind of take the lead on this. There are tens of thousands of missing or dead black and Native women and girls in this country and Canada. From our standpoint in our own communities, how can we treat our women better, and how can we better protect them? I'll start with Walelu. You can start us off there.
Dismantle the patriarchy. And as simple as that answer is, I know it's a very complicated concept, but if you want to stop violence against women, you have to start by dismantling the patriarchy, because that is the root of violence against women. That is the root of the entire concept of women as inferior, or women as property, or women as anything but equals in a society, from a societal value. That's the answer to that question on every level. If you dismantle the patriarchy and you dismantle the idea of patriarchal values, then women stop being viewed as a commodity. They stop being viewed as disposable. They stop being viewed as anything but what they should be viewed as, which is human beings, as just as equal and just as worthy as males, and just as worth the time as males, and worth life. That's the answer. It's not an easy answer, and it's not one that the vast majority of males are going to adhere to or going to want to hear, but that's the answer.
Pretty fair answer to me.
You go next.
Monica, well, let's go. Let's reverse it. Tanja, same question.
Well, I co-sign what Walelu said, but I would also add kind of to dismantling the patriarchy, dismantling white supremacy, because I think that the bodies of women of color in particular are rendered in these precarious situations, and the outcomes are often death and violence for us, more so because of white supremacy in addition to the patriarchy. So I think honest understandings or honest engagements in our own communities of how these white supremacist patriarchal structures infiltrate our daily interactions, our thinking, how we raise our sons, how we raise our daughters, and then start from ourselves on to unravel the systems. I think that's one starting point. I see in so many of my friends and colleagues kind of the socialization that boys undergo and that girls undergo, and those are all within communities of color. And it's not, I know that it's not necessarily a thing that's premeditated or done with intent, but that even despite the wokeness and despite all the reading and the theoretical understandings, the systems have infiltrated us in so many ways, and we reproduce them in so many different ways, so that I think it's such a hard question to ask, how we can better protect women, maybe how we can better raise our sons, or better undo the patriarchy in them, so that the generations to come are going to have a starting point at least. It's so complicated.
Anne, same question.
Well, I don't feel like anything's going to change until men step up. It's like I've been in like I worked with a rape crisis center, and we did like walks at night, and what made the difference is when the men walked with the women. And it's every culture, every race. It's the women that are abused and killed and raped, and so I mean it's a higher percentage of natives than blacks, but white women are being killed at a high rate. And it's some of it, like I watched that Peterson on last night, and he killed 2 of his wives, and he just considered them property. So, if women don't get equal pay, equal rights, they're never going to be considered equal. So that's pretty much my thoughts on that.
I think you're right about it has to start with men, because if we don't stop it, then who's, you know, for the ones doing it. So the source needs to cut it out. Monica?
Yeah, so a lot of the like the content we're talking about is like really helping me to just unload a lot of the emotions that I already feel about these, but that I, you know, that I always talk about over and over without having to emote, because I just need to talk about it, but it's actually really helping me to emote hearing other people talk about it. So I really appreciate this. To be honest, I feel like I felt really sad when I watched the video by Angela Brown, I believe, on intersectionality and how it relates to the Black Lives Matter movement as far as Black women not being as known or having their names said as much as we know Black men that were killed. And so same thing, like once I, over the past year, became more familiar with the hashtag MMIW, it really helped me to see like how, I guess, overlooked and how minimized the deaths of women are that are African and Native. So I really had to like sit with that for a while and also acknowledge like my own complacency with allowing that, you know, to happen. And then I guess response would be as to how we can better take care of women is that not only do men need to step up and dismantle all of their shit and hold other men accountable whenever they see it or whenever they hear it or anything like that, just like with racism, we have to hold people accountable whenever we see it or we're in the presence of it, even if we weren't really prepared to do so. We also need to like really make sure that we are centering who these people are so that, you know, for example, say her name was really prevalent for me for the Black Lives Matter movement because it really made that person real to me, you know, just like Michael Brown's name is real and Trayvon Martin's name is real. I needed to be able to say the names of our women who were killed in order to like really center that and make that real for me. Same thing with our Indigenous women, like Savannah Graywin, for example. Like that was probably one of the more shaking murders that I centered on just because of the whole thing with her baby being involved and her being taken away from her baby as a newborn. That was just really like really unsettling for me as the most recent one that I actually, no, there's another one I stumbled on yesterday, but haven't been able to say her name yet. So I think really just making sure that we say their names and make them real in the space and talk about their legacy and that they did deserve life and they were worth life. And just continue to I think, uphold other women as well when we're in spaces and we see them being targeted, to just, you know, continue to step in and hold each other up as we have been, you know, but also having men attend our actions is another thing. You know, I've noticed that so many women put themselves, their bodies, and their, you know, professions and everything on the line, and a lot of men sometimes seem to opt out. And they let us go out there and, you know that we're going to face all kinds of things from other men, especially white men, and white women. And sometimes I feel so angry because I'm like, why are you allowing us to experience this harm? You know, because there's always more protection if you do have men near you, you know, because that's our society's code, you know, that men are more valued and respected and taken seriously. So on that end too, we need men to stand by us with our actions and with our resistance, and that, you know, can help embolden us to be able to do things we wouldn't do if it was just us as women because of our need to protect ourselves. So that's all I had to say.
This is sobering reality. It's hard enough being a black man in America. I can't imagine being a colored woman or a Native woman or a black woman. To see if someone who's Native and a trans woman or a black trans woman, it's one in every 2,600 black trans women are murdered in the United States. If every group had that murder rate, it would leap up to, what is it, 120,000. The murders in 2015 were 15,000. They'd go up to 120 if everybody was in danger of black trans women, right? I'll ask the women here, do you want me or Derrick to say anything about this topic?
I'm interested to know what you have to say.
Me too, especially since we just talked about men stepping up.
There you go. Put us on the spot. So Derrick, I'll follow you. I just said something. I'm not trying to hide.
I definitely think that men should be stepping up. In particular, like with the black community, not just with black trans women, but we need to be doing that more with them, because I feel like when I do see men stepping up, it's a little bit more likely not to be trans women. So I think that it's important that we not be letting them out of our mind sight, or allowing ourselves to think that we can kind of let them go by the wayside. I know that in the black community, because of how black men have traditionally been seen, and because a lot of times it would be a black woman who might be in the house and she might have a little bit more education, it has been advantageous to send her to do certain things, not necessarily into battle, but to interact in certain ways, just because white people have always been a little bit more comfortable. But I was talking to some of my cousins yesterday about why that probably cannot continue in the way that it has, just because we are seeing a lot more Klan people. I'm sure everybody remembers Charlottesville, has been seeing what's going on in St. Louis. And I just don't feel comfortable seeing as many women as I do out there. But at the same time, I do understand why there are certain black men who maybe have records who might be sentenced to like these disproportionate sentences should they, be taken in. So, I want us as black men to maybe start working on some protocols that we can still be present, but we can keep people who might be in danger of arousing, police aggression still safe, but not leaving them on the front lines by themselves. And I also would encourage, my sister is going to like the gun range, and my family's from the South, so everyone has a gun. So, but I don't know if that's everyone's style, but I've definitely been talking to my mom about it as well. I kind of don't tell the women in my family what to do. Like, we kind of occupy people's spaces. So like, I have a mother, my great-grandmother, and then my grandmother. And so it's kind of hard sometimes for me to recommend certain things to them. But I had to said to my mom that I think that she should maybe start going. Now, if she does, I'm not sure, but I will keep asking.
Well, and I'll ask you guys the same question after I answered this question now. What did y'all think of what Derrick had to say?
I like that you made the point about, I'm sorry, this is Monica. I like that you made the point about standing up for trans women. As soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, that's one of those things, that we often, do gravitate or speak more in cis-het terms, and it's something I'm working on. But I appreciated hearing that. That's all.
Well, for me, I just don't feel like, why do we have to take up arms?
Mm-hmm.
Like, like when people break up, they have to kill the other person. It just seems like nobody can walk away anymore. And I just don't think that everybody being armed is going to solve anything.
Fair point.
Yeah, I'm a little ambivalent about weapons as well, just because coming from a background of having been physically abused in relationships, I already understand that most men are already armed just within themselves to have more strength than I do. Why am I going to then give them another weapon to use against me? So I've always been a little ambivalent about arming myself against that, just because it feels like I would end up doing more harm to myself by bringing another weapon that could very easily be taken from me in a situation.
My point.
I'm sorry, Nolan. I didn't hear the comment on arming. Can someone quickly reiterate what the comment was on being armed?
Oh, I was just saying that my sister had been going to the gun range with some of my older cousins, and I had recommended to my mom that maybe she should go as well, but I'm not exactly sure whether she will or not, because I'm not exactly sure whether she wants to either.
Right.
We have been a little bit more concerned just because there have been like some personal incidents. I live like 3 hours south from them, so the concern was that there might not always be someone else there, but they have, at least my mom has expressed kind of like the same kind of ambivalence towards it, which I do understand. So,
I don't know. My comment is like, I think there may be like cultural and age differences in that thought, because I personally would feel more protected with a firearm, and that is the route that I do plan to go. And the reason is because death threats do get thrown around so loosely when you're in activism. And of course, I mean, even in our community, like I have a Latina organizer friend of mine who received a death threat when she was doing a rally in response to DACA, and it put her off the map for a minute, and it has really impacted, from what I've gathered, her ability to continue to organize or to attend and assist or support other organizations where those things can be triggered. So I really feel like it's individual. And at the same time, like I keep thinking of the rights that everyone well, I won't say everyone, I'll be specific. I keep thinking of the rights that especially white men often cite. Well, we have the right to do this. We have the right to free speech. We have the right to bear arms. And I think for me, feminism also means that, I have those equal rights, but I also have, more of a concern for my protection. Also because I am, a single person, and I do live alone, and I do have little ones. And so, to me, my mindset is that, not only is that my right, that, I would feel more confident and a little less fearful of being open if I knew that I could protect myself if I really had to. I do martial arts, too, on the side, just so I can have an alternate form of protection that's not based on a weapon. But I know that I wouldn't be able to possibly defend myself if somebody had a weapon, with that. I don't know that I could do that in the moment, but I really think it's individual, and I know that cultural, differences can probably play into that too, and also like religious beliefs as well. So I think that we have to acknowledge that there could be a diverse reason for different responses here. That's all.
Definitely.
I guess, and I was kind of feeling it in my psyche before the weapon subject came up. The lengths of destruction that men do to women, especially colored women, trans women, Native and Black women. It's just so inhumane. And the fact that women of color have to defend themselves with a firearm or a knife or what have you, it breaks my heart, because that shouldn't be a thing, but it is. It's the reality. And like y'all said, we have to step up as men and put a stop to it. I went through, I think it was last year, I can't remember that, when the number of missing and murdered indigenous women and girls were allegedly up to about 1,200. I went through every single one and tweeted out every single one, just to my small way of honoring each person. And just the lack of humanity that these women and girls are treated with. But that, like Savannah, Greywind, I mean, it has to stop, and men have to do whatever we have to do to decolonize. As her name is Brooksita on Twitter, she said, "Decolonize your penis." That's what men have to do. However we have to do that, read, well, one thing, listen to women, that's number one, number two, and number three. But whether it's reading, whether it's being more open-minded to a thought that disagrees with what's in our brain at the time, whatever we have to do, we have to stop it. It's been going on for far too long. Just like this whole, double genocide in the first place. This one, I think maybe let's try to do it more like open-ended, like back and forth, because we could play around with this. When the revolution comes, what do you want it to look like? Anybody who wants to jump in, just go ahead.
Can't even imagine.
That is a hard one.
Well, I'll start this off. I imagine it white America looking at what its precious country really is, staring it right in the face, understanding that Washington and Jefferson and Jackson were hardly heroes. They were the worst people to ever live on this planet. And understanding what the system then and even now does to really anyone who isn't white, cisgendered, male, or straight, or able-bodied as well, and wealthy. See, seeing that full array of oppression, because although we are growing in numbers because there's just more people of color in the country, they still have the majority. So for me, it's the people of color and the true allies, true white allies, coming together and putting that reality and that history right in their face on a grand scale, where they can't run away from it anymore. They can't Donald Trump themselves and go, Frederick Douglass? Isn't he a boxer in the 60s? No. No more of that. No more of that. And then from there we build each tear the thing down and rebuild. And that's kind of where in some ways the fun begins, but also what kind of society would we build? And I always say, let's go back to before white people got here and then came over to Africa. We had some of the most intelligent, advanced political systems to this day, and we've forgotten that. We always think of Marx and Lenin and how they had some very intelligent people, but had great ideas. But let's go back a little bit farther. When we had our own communities and countries and nations, and how successful we both were. We even traded with each other for, we came over to Sher Island and befriended Native people, and there was no genocide involved. And, anybody who wants to add to that, disagree with that, go ahead.
Well, I think, like the minorities, if they all came together, the white people would be the minorities.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like Martin Luther King got all the black people together, and the Native people have to do that, and they did with Standing Rock. It brought all the tribes together for the first time in history. So I actually think Trump is uniting out of, not that he wants to, but he's uniting all the Mexicans and the blacks and the natives together because we're all in the same situation.
He is that stupid. Yeah, Trump.
Yeah, he doesn't realize it.
That's true. What else does anybody think about, when the revolution won't be televised? Well, if it was televised in your head, what would it look like? Or what do you want it to look like?
I think it will be people just taken to the street, like the protest, like the Women's March. I mean, I think it will look like something like that if it gets to that point.
Europe is pretty good at that. They'll have tens of thousands of people protesting, hundreds of thousands of people protesting. I remember talking to Peter Linderos. He's with the American Indian Movement. And he got a protest together when Washington's football team was playing Baltimore, which is kind of a mini rivalry because they're so close, Baltimore and Washington. 5 people came. 5. You have the equivalent of the New York Niggers playing, and 5 people show up. So that's speaking on numbers and volume coming together. I'm right with you, Anne.
Not to romanticize Europe because it's awful too, but that is the truth. And when I was growing up, people were out in the streets every week about something. Not to make it trivial, but certain things such as Monsanto buying up large portions of Europe didn't happen, even though that has been the push and the plan there as well, just because people were not allowing certain things to happen because they came together despite hating each other across the lines for other things. There were things that folks agreed upon, which were environmental things or what they really wanted or not wanted things to look like in terms of food and those kinds of issues. So for me, the revolution would look like mass awakening to certain things, not just ideologies or things that people repeat to think it will be true eventually, like denying climate change or denying what is being done to the planet, but instead that there's some sort of eye-opening moment that will push people into the streets and take over their power, because we have it, but not alone. So I think it's infuriating that across communities, folks will deny what, well, I mean, I guess since truths are, individual and whatnot, but what I know to be true and what researchers know to be true who've dedicated their lives to it, and folks will deny it just because it's their opinion, and time is running out in a lot of places for that reason. So for me, it would look like mass awakening. So we would turn and really tackle some of the things that are pressing and figure out how to best educate our young ones and ourselves, and invest in our health, mental health, physical health, nutrition, reading, recovering our histories, that kind of thing. But yeah.
Recovery. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, this is Monica. I was just going to say that, to be honest, when I think about that, I feel like a lot of it has been cumulatively happening and has been accumulating, with smaller movements becoming bigger, especially over the past, over the last election. To me, BLM is definitely a huge part of that. Just seeing how quickly, that has grown as a movement, but also what its principles and values are. To me, it's a form of recentering and revalidating worth and identity. Likewise, even No Dapple and Change the Mascot, Not Your Mascot, to me, those are parts of that. And, even now putting together, both Black and Native issues, and working to actually, align or stand in solidarity with those and work through, the history and even the current state of prejudice and bias within and between both groups. I think that these things are definitely accumulating, towards that. So that's just my take on it in my short 30 years.
I can dig it. Anybody else's ideas? And we all have the dream of, not to copy Martin Luther King with I have a dream, but we all have that dream coming into our heads every now and again when the revolution finally comes, when that moment finally comes where we can look around and not be so scared and not be so hopeless. Anybody else want to chime in with their painting a picture of their ideal revolution? Going once, going twice.
Well, I actually agree with a lot of what Tanja said. I crave that day when, denial is no longer an option for people, because they seem to really thrive off the idea that they can just live in a state of constant denial, whether it be of racism or climate change or, the sky is blue. I don't care what it is. People just seem to love living in denial, and that's one of the most irritating things for me, honestly, that idea that, if you just ignore it, it'll go away. It doesn't matter. If you just, live in this perpetual state of it doesn't exist, then it doesn't exist. And that's how you kill us all, that perpetual state of it doesn't exist. So for me, the revolution is you rip that away. That no longer exists. You can no longer live in a perpetual state of denial. You have to take accountability for your actions. You have to face up to what has been done, to what you're doing, to you know, the consequences of your everyday actions and how those affect the people around you. You can no longer live in, oh, well, I know I just ran you off the road, but that doesn't really matter because I have to get to my meeting. That's not an option. That's not okay. You can't have somebody, you know, plowing through protesters because they think that's fine. You can't we can't keep living like that. It's not okay. That's my idea of revolution. The idea that, you know, not just white people, but white people and anyone else who wants to live in that perpetual state of, no, it's fine, just ignore it. No, you can't just ignore it. Ignoring it is no longer viable at all. The planet is dying. If the planet dies, we all die too. Ignoring it is not an option. Trump is not the answer. Anyone who continues selling you something is not the answer. Those that want to be conned, that's not the answer. That's the revolution I want to wake up to. That no longer being an option for anyone. You have to be awake because there isn't another option.
Oh, yes.
I'm with that. I'm with that wholeheartedly. Rip the dang band-aid off. Well, we have a few minutes left. This one, this is a question I really like. Tanja put it on the table. What are our responsibilities to each other, particularly when it comes to alliance building, talking about Indigenous and Black issues? Monica?
I am thinking about this question. You know what? Okay. I think if I had to say something, if I were to speak, so to say, in defense of Black folks, I think it would be to understand that most Black people that I know anyway have had the exact same education as everybody else regarding Native folks, unless something or someone has intervened on the mainstream whitewash education. And that many Black folks, we know our history because that's part of our identity. That's who we are. You know, we know and identify with those things and events and people that spoke out for or serve as forms of liberation, or even serve as forms of place markers, places we don't want to go back to, but we don't have that same knowledge in the same exact way and depth. Those of us who are both and who choose to observe both cultures, we have to learn, you know, and that can be really hard because then we can experience a lot of prejudice, a lot of bias, you know, because my experience, like I have seen, observed, you know, that type of thing, Native people who are very biased and prejudiced against Black folks. And what I get from that is that they have the same bias and prejudice towards us that white people have almost. You know, like, we're not dumb, you know, we're not, you know, uneducated, or we're not, you know, all of those stereotypes and things. I guess I would say, like, to, you know, please press way past those. And I know I'm not talking, like, you know, mostly to people here, but, like, just generically, please press past those in the same way that, you know, Black folks need to press past, you know, old media glorified stereotypes of Native people, and also listen to how they could be perpetuating oppression. You know, one thing I keep hearing, or one thing I keep seeing with the mascotting issue, which is this, I'm glad that it came into my identity through this issue, because it makes a lot of sense to me, and I can see parallels and also reach out on both sides and say, so, hey, here's what's going on, or hey, here's why this is a problem. And I hear Native people and completely support, you know, them saying that, you know, that we Black folks also have to be confronted on our ignorance and have to be confronted on, you know, even though I believe that supremacy, part of what goes along with supremacy is continuing to pit groups against each other, but doing so also by only offering one form of education. And so I think, you know, through having alliances, we are forced to learn and to confront those prejudices and biases, you know, kind of in real time, and we can deal with those with the languages that we've developed. You know, but we have to hold Black people accountable too for ways that they oppress Native folks by wearing headdresses or dressing up, you know, in, you know, Pocahontas costumes. And a lot of people will get it, but some people, you know, will continue to practice forms of erasure without making the connection of how it's connected, you know, also to supremacy against Black people. And so I think that's what I would say is the first thing I would say is, like, Native folks, I'm so sorry. Like, well, Black people are not dumb, but we've just had the same education everyone else has had, and even that I've had about myself, you know, as someone who's also Native, and that the intervention has to happen. So, you know, I think, too, that being accountable as Black folks, whenever we see a Native person confront a Black person about something, if we can in any way, either change the language or I don't know, reinterpret the language in a way that will be understood, because it can be very difficult for one group to approach another group and for it to be taken just like if you're approaching a white person. You know, it's usually the fragility right off the bat. That happens in groups of color too, and so it's helpful to, you know, have those that are supportive of you, that are allies with you, to be able to kind of have that bridge, you know. And so I find that on both sides it's really important for that. And that's just really, you know, I kind of feel sad that we're in the position that we're in as far as not having more education about, you know, how our separate but, you know, somehow linked harms that have been committed against us by supremacy and colonization. You know, we kind of remain divided and really, like, centered on what's happened to each of us without also saying, but also this parallel does exist, and I do acknowledge that, and I want to make sure that my Native, you know, friends and people I care about are also safe in my space. And so I think it's just being, like, less selfish with that, and really listening and understanding and just working through those really uncomfortable issues and those pauses and that type of thing, and just realizing we've all been kind of asked by, you know, supremacy and colonization, and so unfortunately part of the labor is that we have to work together to kind of undo that. But that's where I feel like, you know, again, using the language that we've learned, anti-racist language, but also, you know, having allies, you know, from the group you're trying to approach or you're trying to intervene on the behaviors, having allies from that group already that can, you know, back you up and help be a bridge is really important. So that's what I have to say.
I like how you said that we have to look at another race of people going through similar things, because I think that's a main point that our two people have to get. And I will say it's more, the nonsense is more on our Black folks' side than Indigenous people's side. And a lot of, I mean, it is ignorance, but then some of it turns into willful ignorance. So I'm glad that you just brought that up, Monica, because you don't know there are two people are this unique in terms of the oppression that gets poured on us. To Derrick?
Okay. I'm going to just kind of, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
No, a little muffled for me.
Okay. I was just going to say that I do feel that that's kind of why I tried to step in when that stage argument was kind of going on, just because I felt that there could be a little bit more compassion. I do also want to say, on behalf of, like, Black people, a lot of stuff, like, for me, like, for my family, I'm the person who, well, me and my cousin Michael, because we have, our family paid for us to have a certain education, because everyone in the family is not educated. So it's our job to know certain things for the family. So if we were talking to like a family unit group, a lot of times there'll be like that one person who might, you know, kind of an expert on a given topic. So I guess I was just going to say, just be mindful that not everybody, especially if you're talking to like older Black people, they have a lot of, sometimes they're really, really positive, and then sometimes they are slightly negative just because of what people tell us in school. And unfortunately, like someone mentioned, a lot of times the only access we have to certain parts of history is someone else telling us, because it's been kind of like this concerted effort to keep us apart, or at least keep us divided. So I would also just like to say that we both kind of commit to not fall face first into that, like wanting to argue or like wanting to like take it to level 10 immediately. Sometimes it can be hard to trust the person's intent, to like trust that they're not trying to be offensive, that they're just asking a question or just trying to speak from their own personal experience. But I feel that the more that we can do that, the fewer of these kind of issues.
It's something to think about. That is definitely something to think about. I never heard that put like that before. It's hard to trust a person's intent. It's pretty deep. Tanja?
So,
yeah.
First of all, so Derrick, I completely agree, and I really like the idea. Well, I think that being generous in the spaces, especially when it comes to alliance building, and by generous I mean that sometimes you give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not seeking to offend or perpetuate something, but that they don't necessarily know better, versus jumping head first, or like, you know, the Twitter style. I guess maybe that's why I don't do Twitter well, is to take offense and then go and attack. And I think that the benefit of having a space where we can talk to each other, for example, is that things don't come out that way necessarily, or you can negotiate certain meanings. But the reason I asked the question was because I think there are so many layers to responsibilities, especially if you have varying levels of education about each other, or you know only a limited amount of people from different communities. And I mean, not to say that if you know a lot of people from a community that you know them all, but I think that there's varying levels of engagement. One of my colleagues actually came to work the other day, and she's a Black woman, and she worked in a school that serves historically underserved students, and it had a mascot on the sweater, and I asked her about it, and she said, oh yeah, well that's their, that's the school logo, and I wear it because, this is like the school that serves these students, and they're doing all this great educational stuff. And so I had a conversation with her about how problematic mascots are and the push and all of that, and she had never really thought about that. She had more so thought about the students that are going to the school and what that school represents to them. And for me, the issue of mascots has always been something where I'm like, that's crazy. Why would anyone argue, that this is okay? Whereas I found myself struggling more when there have been arguments about decolonization and what that's supposed to look like, and what our responsibilities are as people who have come here, after the slave trade and all of those things. So I think that I don't have an answer to my own question, otherwise I probably would have asked it. But I think that there is a lot of layers, and you all have already helped me think about this. So thank you so far.
Thank you for putting the question on the table and being here tonight. Anybody else want to take a stab at that topic?
I just wanted to say that I've met Gregory Dick, and hearing it from a black man talking to Native people. He was at one of our protests, and he just explained that it's the same thing. You know, it's all oppression. You know, and if we just realized that and all came together, you know, we could get further. He just gave me a different perspective on it, you know, because and he understood, you know, and explained it so well. And if you watch any of his, like, YouTube videos, it's just, you know, one of those aha moments, you know. And, you know, no matter what the race, if they're oppressing you, it's all the same. But, you know, we found that, like, with the Mascot issue, is what happens is you get a little bit of infighting, and people need to look past that and stick to the issue, you know, and not, you know, not get divided over, you know, the little things. So, you know, we just need to just stick together more. You know, like they say, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. You know, look at something from their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Really helps.
I would also just like to add just really quickly that I feel that we've been told certain things about one another for the express purpose of creating dissension. So I remember this was like when I first joined Twitter, like a couple weeks into it, there was a conversation going about who got free stuff and who went to school for this. And it just seemed like a lot of people on our side had been told that natives like got free tuition and stuff like that. And so I asked just like this group on Facebook that I run. It had like over 40 people. And most of us had heard that throughout our lives, like just through like different adults, teachers, and whatnot. And so I can't say for what reason people are going around and telling people that as kids, but I don't think that they're all benign reasons. I don't think that it's just like a misunderstanding. I think that it's like a seed that is planted that will grow into resentment, because you might start feeling like, oh, well then I should get X, Y, and Z. So if you ask someone from another community, like, hey, do you get this? And they say no, like, A, believe them. Especially if you're talking to a whole group of people, because it was getting to the point where it's just like, and I kind of understood, because when an adult tells you something as a child, like, you're kind of like, why would they lie? But just realize that maybe not everyone had the best intention in telling certain things.
That's a good thing to bring up, because I was a fan of Larry Wilmore, the comedian, on the Daily Show, and then he had the Nightly Show, and I'd watch the Nightly Show from time to time and enjoy it, and then randomly I came across the picture and the title of his book that he wrote, and the title was, I wish we had gotten casinos, meaning instead of whatever we got, I wish we'd gotten casinos. And the fact is, if you pooled all the money from the casinos, it wouldn't put a dent in the poverty of indigenous people. And you know, most black folks, just like any other group in the United States, for the most part, have no idea about the realities of indigenous people. Absolutely no idea. The key is actually, once you face with the truth step up and do the right thing and decolonize your brain.
I also feel that stems from a desire, because you can, I said this before as well, sometimes when you hear Farrakhan talk, like you hear him talking about wanting to ask the federal government for this special piece of land, and you can tell that he's kind of thinking like about a reservation. You can tell that he doesn't really know, people don't know what reservations are like. So to a black person who kind of lives in a place where I grew up, where there's like this hyper visibility, where there's like a policeman on every corner looking to arrest you, like pull you out of the car. Most of my family and friends don't live in the city that I was born anymore, because you just can't as a black person. You have to live outside in the country because it's terrible. And so I think from a person coming from that perspective, wanting to have anywhere almost that they can escape to, I'm not trying to justify the continual comment, but I do understand that desire to want to escape to any place. But sometimes it does feel that we're just never going to be free here. But then I would just say to black people who might be listening, you know, that's why we're building this solidarity, so that we can change that from the inside, because that's not an answer either. It's not maybe what you think it is, and it won't be where you think it is. Does that make sense?
I think that's a good point to end on. And I think next week, if we want to do this again, we can talk about the misconceptions, the stereotypes, and the untruths that one people think of another people and vice versa. I'm talking about our two people. But hopefully we can do this again next week and keep this thing going, because I've enjoyed it, and we need this type of solidarity. We need solidarity in general. So,
count me in.
Yeah, wonderful.
Me too. You all are really, really amazing people. I'm really grateful.
Agreed. We're all survivors.
Wanishi, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming together for this, and I guess we'll see each other next week.
All right.
Peace.
See you then.